Jordan Webb was 38 years old when a Fulton County judge handed his wife the house he built with his own hands and handed him a check for $4,200. He walked out of that courtroom with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a 2017 Honda Accord he would sleep in for the next 3 nights. Camille hadn't just left the marriage. She had spent 18 months quietly restructuring their joint accounts, erasing his financial footprint from the home he renovated room by room, and positioning herself for a life she had already chosen, with someone else. She left that courthouse believing she had taken everything he had. She was right about the house. She was wrong about the man. 3 years later, Jordan's face appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. And in the 48 hours that followed, Camille called his phone 97 times. He didn't answer once. What he did instead would cost her everything she thought she'd won. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the last quiet hour of the morning. Jordan Webb had been up since 5:15. Not because he had to be. His shift at Harmon Logistics didn't start until 8, but because this was how he was built. Early, steady, ahead of the thing before it became a problem. He sat at the kitchen table in a gray t-shirt and joggers, his laptop open, a yellow legal pad beside it with 3 neat columns of numbers: mortgage, utilities, car insurance, HOA fee. He moved through each line with the same focus he brought to everything: quiet, precise, nothing wasted. A mug of black coffee sat at his elbow, still steaming. This was Jordan Webb at 38. Not flashy, not loud, just a man who handled what needed handling before anyone thought to ask. The house around him was proof of that. 4 bedrooms in a southwest Atlanta neighborhood that had been coming up slowly for years. He'd bought it with Camille 6 years ago when the bones were good and the price reflected the work it needed. He had done most of that work himself. The kitchen backsplash, dark slate tile, laid by hand on a cold October Saturday while Camille slept in. He'd watched 4 YouTube tutorials the morning before he started it, sitting in this same chair to make sure he got it right. The back deck, the crown molding in the hallway, the expanded bedroom closet he built over a long July weekend, working in the Georgia heat with the door open and a box fan blowing warm air across his back. A contractor had quoted them $4,000 for that closet. Jordan had done it for $600 and a sore back. He never complained about any of it. That was not in him. He saw something that needed doing, and he did it. Simple as that. He pulled up the household budget spreadsheet and cross-referenced it against the legal pad. Everything lined up. It always lined up when Jordan was the one looking at it. He heard the bedroom door open down the hall. Soft footsteps. Then Camille appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in her silk robe, hair pulled back, already looking composed in the way she always managed to look composed, even at 6 in the morning. "You're up early," she said. Not a question. Wanted to run the numbers before the week starts. She moved to the coffee maker and poured herself a mug. "We're fine, Jordan. I went through everything last week." "I know," he said. "I just like to see it myself." She glanced at the legal pad, the way she sometimes glanced at things he was working on. A quick look. Not dismissive exactly, but not interested either. Then she turned toward the window and watched the yard. "I've been thinking about the Harmon situation," Jordan said. He kept his voice easy. "Martinez over in the southeast region told me last week that half the independent carriers they work with are bleeding money on routing inefficiencies. Basic stuff. The kind of thing the big companies fixed a decade ago, but nobody's built a clean solution for the mid-size guys." Camille sipped her coffee. "I've had an idea for about 2 years now," Jordan continued. "Route optimization software, built specifically for regional carriers. It wouldn't take much to—" "Did you call the HOA about the fence panel?" Camille asked. She was still looking at the window. Jordan stopped. He looked at her for a moment. Not yet. They're going to cite us if we wait much longer. You know how they are. I'll call today. She nodded and moved toward the hallway. Don't forget you have dinner with Darnell Thursday. I already told him you'd bring the drinks. And that was that. The idea. 2 years of quiet thinking. 2 years of mental blueprints drawn in the margins of his actual life, folded back into his pocket without a fight, the way it always did. He turned back to his laptop. He thought about the promotion. 4 years ago, his supervisor at Harmon had offered him the regional director role, a position that would have tripled his salary and put him on a path that felt, for the first time in his career, like it matched his actual capacity. He had been ready for it. He had known it then, and he knew it now. But Camille had said they weren't ready to relocate. Said it gently, reasonably, with that particular tone she used when she wanted a conversation to be over. We're finally settled here, Jordan. We just got the house. Let's not uproot everything for a title. He had let it go. He had trusted her read on it, the way he trusted her read on most things. That was what you did. You built the life together. You made the calls together. He clicked over to the shared banking app to schedule a transfer for the water bill. The screen loaded. He stared at it. He clicked refresh. The number didn't change. He set his coffee down slowly and leaned forward. The joint savings account, the one they'd been building for 6 years, the one he deposited half his paycheck into every 2 weeks without fail, showed a balance of $4,800. It should have been close to $60,000. Jordan did not move for a long time. The screen glowed in the early morning quiet. $40,800. He read the number again the way you read something you don't understand. Slowly, like a second pass might change it. It didn't change. He clicked to the transaction history. The list loaded and he scrolled through it. And the further back he scrolled, the colder the feeling in his chest became. Not panic. Not yet. Something more precise than panic. The specific sensation of a man who is very good at reading numbers, watching numbers, tell him something he cannot explain. He got up. He walked to the hallway and stood there for a moment, listening. Down the hall, behind the closed bedroom door, nothing moved. He went back to the table. He opened every account he had access to. Checking, savings, the emergency fund they'd set up 3 years ago when the water heater went out, and they swore they'd never be caught short again. He cross-referenced dates. He pulled up his last 8 pay stubs from the Harmon employee portal and lined the deposit amounts against the account activity. That was when he found it. 18 months ago, his direct deposit had been quietly unlinked from the joint savings account. It had happened in a single transaction update, a change to the routing structure that he had never seen, never signed off on, and would not have noticed unless he was looking at the account the way he was looking at it right now, at 6 in the morning, in the kitchen of the house he built with his own hands. His paycheck had been going into the joint checking account. Normal, routine. But the automatic transfer that used to pull $2,000 out of every deposit and push it into savings, that transfer had been altered. The amount had been dropped to $40. $40 per cycle, for 18 months, while the balance bled out through withdrawals he could not immediately trace. Because Camille handled the account login, he didn't have full visibility, and he sat back. He thought about the last year and a half. Thought about all the times he'd asked about the savings, and Camille had said, "We're building. It's steady. I'll send you the update this weekend." And he had nodded and trusted her because that was the arrangement. She was organized. She managed the accounts. He focused on the house, on work, on making sure the life ran the way it was supposed to run. He had trusted her. He picked up his phone. He photographed every screen, the transaction history, the account structure page, the routing change, the withdrawal dates. Then he opened his laptop, forwarded everything he could access to an email address he created right there in the dark. At 6 a.m., with his coffee gone cold beside him, he worked quietly for 2 hours. When he was done, he closed the laptop and set it exactly where it had been. He washed his mug. He straightened the legal pad. He went to work. The next 3 days, he was the same man he always was. He came home on time. He fixed a loose hinge on the back gate that had been bugging him for a week. He had dinner with Camille on Tuesday night. She made salmon, talked about a closing at work, asked him something about Darnell, and he answered everything normally, cleanly, without a tremor in his voice. But at night, when the house was quiet, he thought about the promotion. He thought about calling it a family decision, when he never actually made the decision, when Camille had made it for him, and he had accepted her reasoning like a man who didn't realize his ceiling had a hand on it. He thought about every business conversation she had redirected, every time he'd brought up the logistics idea, and she'd changed the subject so smoothly that he almost believed he had chosen to let it go. He thought about how she always had the account logins, how she had set them up when they first moved in together, back when she was the one with the corporate paralegal job, and he was mid-level, and it made sense for her to be the organized one. He had never questioned the arrangement because she had always framed it as competence, not control. The difference between those two things was the entire story of the last 9 years. On the morning of the 3rd day, he got dressed, drove to Harmon, and worked a full 8-hour shift. He came home at 5:30, still in his work clothes, gray Harmon polo, khakis, boots, and found the envelope tucked between the storm door and the frame. A white legal envelope, his name printed on the front. He stood in the doorway and opened it. He read it once. Then he read it again. Petition for dissolution of marriage, filed 3 days ago. While he was sitting at this same kitchen table photographing bank statements in the dark. He stood there in the cooling afternoon air, holding the papers, and something settled over him. Not surprise, not grief, not the hot, bright feeling he might have expected. Just clarity, flat and total and cold. This was never a collapse. This was a plan. The courtroom smelled like carpet cleaner and something older underneath it. Something that had been absorbing bad news for decades and never quite aired out. Jordan sat at the table on the left side. Camille sat at the table on the right. 9 years of marriage, and they were 8 feet apart, facing the same direction, which was somehow the loneliest arrangement he had ever been in. He had not looked at her directly since he sat down. The judge was a trim man in his late 50s, named Honorable Carl Bryce. He had the face of someone who had seen every version of this particular story, and was no longer moved by any of them. He read from the documents in front of him with the flat efficiency of a man who had somewhere else to be. Camille's attorney was a woman named Hargrove, sharp gray suit, a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Jordan's monthly car note. She stood when she spoke, and she spoke like someone who had rehearsed every word twice before breakfast. Jordan's attorney was a public advocate named Marcus. He was not bad. He was simply outgunned, and he knew it. And Jordan had known it since their first meeting 3 weeks ago when Marcus shuffled through his notes with the careful movements of a man working 5 cases at once. "Your Honor," Hargrove said, her voice smooth and unhurried, "the documentation before the court clearly reflects that mortgage payments on the marital property at," she read the address, "were drawn exclusively from the restructured joint savings account for the preceding 22 months. My client made disproportionate and consistent financial contributions to the property's current market value, both through those payments and through her professional management of the household accounts." Jordan kept his eyes forward. Professional management. That was what they were calling it. Hargrove continued. She cited figures. She cited dates. She presented a clean, tight narrative about a woman who had carried the financial weight of a home while her husband's contributions had become, in the documented record, minimal. She did not say he didn't contribute. She didn't have to. The account history said it for her. because the account history had been shaped for 18 months to say exactly that. Marcus objected twice. Judge Bryce noted the objections and moved on. The house was awarded to Camille at 10:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jordan heard the words. He registered them the way you register something you already knew was coming, not with shock, but with the dull, heavy recognition of a thing finally landing that has been falling for a long time. The 4-bedroom house in southwest Atlanta. The kitchen backsplash he laid by hand on a Saturday in October 3 years ago, watching YouTube tutorials at 6 in the morning before Camille woke up. The back deck he rebuilt over 2 weekends in July heat because the contractor quoted $4,000 and Jordan could not see the sense in paying someone else to do work he knew how to do. The bedroom closet he opened up so she'd have room for the clothes she kept buying. All of it. Gone. Awarded, on paper, to the woman who managed the accounts. The settlement check was cut for $4,200, his share of what remained in the joint savings after Camille's attorneys argued her disproportionate contribution to the balance. Marcus placed it on the table in front of him without a word. Jordan picked it up. He looked at it. Then he folded it once and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say to a room like this, a room that had already made its decision based on paperwork that had been arranged carefully and deliberately to tell a story where he was a minor character in his own marriage. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked out. The Accord had 2 suitcases in the trunk, his laptop bag on the passenger seat, and his tool bag in the back seat. He had packed them 4 days ago. He had not told Darnell this, or anyone. He drove without a direction for a while, through neighborhoods he knew, past streets he had driven 1,000 times, past the exit that would have taken him toward the house that was no longer his. He did not take that exit. Around 9 p.m., he pulled into the lot behind a Kroger on Cascade Road and parked near the back, away from the lights at the entrance. He turned off the engine. He sat in the quiet. He could call Darnell. He knew that. Darnell would answer on the first ring. Darnell would have the room ready before Jordan finished explaining. That was who his brother was, but he couldn't do it yet. Not tonight. Tonight, he was too raw, too close to the surface of it. And the thought of someone seeing him like this, even Darnell, especially Darnell, sat wrong in a way he didn't have words for. He needed to feel the full weight of this before he let anyone else near it. So he reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go. He stared at the ceiling of the car. The parking lot lights threw a sickly orange glow through the windshield that made everything look slightly wrong, slightly unreal, like a photograph taken under bad conditions. He lay there and let the quiet be what it was. Then he reached to the passenger seat. He pulled his laptop onto his chest. He opened it. The screen light was sharp in the dark car. He opened a blank document. At the top, he typed 2 words, Web Root Solutions. He stared at them for a long moment. Then he started to write. Jordan woke up wrong. His neck had locked somewhere around 3 a.m., and his lower back had opinions about the driver's seat that he did not have the energy to argue with. The orange parking lot glow had faded into the gray-pink light of early morning. A garbage truck was working its way through the strip mall at the far end of the lot, its hydraulics groaning in the quiet. He sat up slowly, rolled his neck until something released, looked at the clock on his phone. 5:47 a.m. 14 texts. None of them from anyone he needed to answer right now. He set the phone down, pulled his laptop off the passenger seat, and checked what he'd written the night before. 4 pages of rough framework. Route optimization for small regional carriers, the kind of companies that ran 8 to 20 trucks and got eaten alive by inefficiencies that a Fortune 500 operation would fix on a Tuesday afternoon without anyone noticing. He read through it. It was rough. It was also real. He closed the laptop. He drove to the 24-hour gym on Campbellton. The locker room was mostly empty at that hour. One older man with a towel over his shoulder heading toward the showers, not making eye contact with anyone, which suited Jordan fine. He found an open locker, pulled clean clothes from the duffel he kept on the back seat for exactly this, and stood under the hot shower for longer than necessary. He let himself have that much. Then he dressed. He looked at himself in the long mirror above the row of sinks. He looked like a man who had slept in a car, if you knew what to look for. If you didn't know, he looked like a man who had woken up early and gotten to it. He pulled out his phone, found Darnell's name. Darnell picked up on the first ring. He always did. "I need a few weeks," Jordan said. There was a short pause, not hesitation, just Darnell registering the weight of the words. "Room's ready," Darnell said. Not what happened. Not "are you okay?" Just, "the room is ready." Jordan stood in the gym locker room and held his phone against his ear and felt something in his chest loosen by one notch. "I'll be there tonight," Jordan said. Darnell lived in a brick ranch house in East Point that he had bought 8 years ago and slowly improved with his own hands, the way brothers from the same mother tend to do things the same way without discussing it. The spare room was small and smelled like fresh linen. There was a lamp and a dresser and enough space for a man to think. They fell into a rhythm without negotiating it. Darnell cooked most nights. Nothing fancy, just real food, the kind that came from a pot on the stove. They ate at the kitchen table. They talked about work, about Darnell's current contracting job, about the Braves, about things that required no weight. Camille's name almost never came up, and when it did, it was only in passing, like a weather event that had already moved through. Jordan was grateful for that, more than he ever said. But the nights were a different thing. He lay in the dark of the spare room, and the marriage came apart in his hands whether he wanted it to or not. Not the drama of it, the divorce, the courtroom, the check, the quieter stuff, the small, consistent architecture of how 9 years had actually gone. There was the promotion, regional director, 4 years into the marriage, a jump that would have tripled his income and put him on a track he could feel in his bones was right. He had told Camille about it over dinner, and she had said, "We're not ready to relocate, Jordan. We've just gotten stable here." And he had heard the word "we" and let it stand. He found out 2 years later from a co-worker at a company happy hour, found out that Camille had called his supervisor's office directly, described the opportunity as a family situation. The supervisor had assumed Jordan was declining. Jordan had never been asked. He lay there and thought about that, let himself think about it plainly, without softening it. Then there were the business ideas. Webroot wasn't the first time that concept had lived in him. He'd brought a version of it to Camille twice, once early in the marriage, once about 5 years in. Both times she had listened carefully, nodded thoughtfully, and then walked him through every reason the timing was wrong, every risk they couldn't afford, every way it made more sense to wait. She was never cruel about it. She was never dismissive. She was reasonable in a tone that closed doors so quietly you didn't notice the latch catching. He thought about that too. He thought about how many times he had made himself smaller because she always had a reason that smaller was safer, and how, for a long time, he had called that love. 3 weeks in, he told Darnell he was leaving. Darnell put down his fork. "You don't have to do that." "I know." "Then why?" Jordan looked at his plate for a moment. "Because I can't rebuild here," he said. "It's not you. It's the feeling of being held. I need to be the one holding." Darnell looked at him for a long moment. He didn't argue further. That was another thing about his brother. He knew when a decision had already been made. He helped Jordan carry his bags to the Accord in the morning without a word. It was not the same as the first night in the Kroger parking lot. That night had been shock. This was a choice. Jordan knew the difference, and the difference mattered more than he could easily explain. He picked up an overnight cleaning shift at a commercial office facility on the South Side. 5 nights a week, out by 5 a.m. Decent hourly rate for quiet work that left his mind free. He showered at the gym. He ate at a 24-hour diner on Campbellton Road, where the coffee was strong and the counter staff learned his order without being asked. He worked on web route solutions in every spare hour. Parking lots, library Wi-Fi zones, the diner table in the back corner near the window. That was his life for 4 months. It was hard in the way that purposeful things are hard, which is a different kind of hard from the kind that just grinds you down. He was at the diner at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, a Tuesday. Some night, that didn't matter. The framework open on his laptop, a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow. He was deep in the carrier pricing model, working through the logic of how a small 8-truck operation could reduce deadhead miles by 30% with the right dispatch optimization. He didn't notice the woman at first. She was sitting across the diner at a two-top near the window. Early 50s, maybe. Natural hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had a dense stack of documents in front of her, the kind with tabs and margin notes, and she was working through them with a red pen, deliberate and unhurried. A cup of black coffee sat beside her, untouched. She looked up from her documents. She looked at his screen. Then she looked at him. "What are you building?" she asked. Jordan looked up from his screen. The woman was still watching him, not rudely, just with the particular focus of someone who had learned to identify things worth paying attention to. "Route optimization," he said, "for small regional carriers." She pulled her reading glasses down from her forehead. "How small?" 8 to 20 trucks. The operators who are too big to run on instinct but too small to afford enterprise dispatch software. They're losing 15–20% of their margin to inefficiency every quarter, and most of them don't even know the exact number. She nodded once. Not impressed. Processing. "What's your data source for the route modeling?" "Right now, it's a hybrid. Public traffic data combined with carrier-reported delivery logs. I'm building a proprietary input layer so the system learns from each operator's specific run patterns over time." "And your monetization model?" "Subscription, tiered by fleet size, low enough that it undercuts what they're currently losing, high enough to build real revenue at scale." She looked at him for a moment. "Who's your first target customer?" Jordan opened his mouth to answer, and then stopped. He sat back slightly. He had just answered 3 questions without once thinking about whether he should. She had walked him directly into a pitch, and he hadn't even felt the door open. She smiled, just slightly. "Sit tight," she said. She picked up her coffee, found it cold, and raised 2 fingers toward the counter without looking. The waitress came by and refilled both their cups without being asked. "Petra Okafor," she said, extending her hand across the space between their tables. "Jordan Webb. Tell me the rest of it, Jordan." They talked for 2 hours. Petra Okafor, it turned out, had spent 20 years as a corporate litigator at a firm in Midtown Atlanta before walking away from it the way people walk away from things that have taken everything they were willing to give. She had pivoted to small business consulting and angel investment 11 years ago. 11 businesses backed. 8 profitable. She spoke about her failures the same way she spoke about her successes, as data, as information, as things that had taught her what she now knew. She asked hard questions, and she let the silence after each one do its work. She didn't fill space the way people do when they're more interested in sounding sharp than in hearing the answer. Jordan answered everything. He had been living inside this framework for 4 months in parking lots and libraries and the back corner of this diner, and he knew it, the way you know something you've built with your own hands in the dark. When she poked at the pricing model, he had a response. When she challenged his assumption about carrier adoption rates, he acknowledged the gap and told her exactly how he planned to close it. At one point, she set her pen down and just looked at him. "You've been working on this alone," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "How long?" 4 months. She looked at him steadily. Something in her expression shifted. Not pity. Nothing close to it. More like the particular focus of someone recalibrating. "The problem is real," she said. "The market is underserved. Your instinct on the pricing tier is correct, and I'll tell you why in a minute." She paused. "How tight is your deck?" "It needs work. Call me when it doesn't." She reached into the leather folder beside her stack of documents and pulled out a business card. White, clean, no logo. Just her name, a phone number, and the words Okafor Advisory in small print. Jordan took the card. He looked at it for a moment. "Why?" he asked. She tilted her head. "You don't know me," he said. "You don't know anything about my background. Why would you give me your card?" Petra picked up her red pen and tapped it once against the stack of documents. "I've been doing this for 11 years, she said. "I have a good sense of what I'm looking at." She stood, gathering her papers with the efficiency of someone who did not waste motion. "The deck, Jordan. Call me when it's tight." She left a 20 on the table and walked out into the dark. He called her 4 days later. The deck was tight. What followed was not easy. Nothing worth having ever arrived easy, and Jordan had long since made peace with that particular truth. But things moved. For the first time in longer than he could name, things actually moved. Petra sharpened his pitch over 3 weeks of sessions at her office in Buckhead. A clean, spare space that smelled like coffee and focus. She connected him to his first 2 carrier clients through her own network. A regional outfit in Macon running 14 trucks, and a smaller operation out of Columbus that had been hemorrhaging money on deadhead runs for 3 years, and knew it. Both signed service agreements. Both saw measurable improvement within 90 days. She invested enough to get WebRoot Solutions off the ground. In exchange, she took 12% equity. Jordan kept 73. He worked like a man who understood exactly what the alternative looked like. 16-hour days were the short ones. He moved out of the Accord and into a studio apartment. Nothing fancy, just walls and a door that locked. He hired his first contractor, then his second. He ate real meals again and stopped noticing that he'd stopped noticing hunger. Year 1, 4 carrier contracts. Year 2, 9. Year 3. $4.3 million in annual revenue, $11 million projected for the year ahead. Petra was installed as general counsel and held her 12% like the quiet, foundational thing it was. Jordan moved out of the apartment and into a house. His house, ground that had only ever been his. He was 41 now. The conference room on the 14th floor had glass walls and a long table, and a view of the Atlanta skyline that never fully lost its effect on him, no matter how many mornings he walked into it. He sat across from Petra, Q3 numbers spread between them. Carrier acquisition cost trending down, retention at 91%. The Series A timeline firming up ahead of schedule. Petra was making a note in the margin of the projection report when his phone buzzed against the table. A text from his publicist. He almost let it sit. Then he read it. Forbes just dropped. New South 40 under 40. Jordan, you're on the spread. He set the phone down. He looked at the table for a moment. Petra glanced up from her notes. What is it? Jordan turned the phone toward her. Petra read the text. She set it back down on the table without a word. Then she smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was the kind that comes from being right about something for a long time and finally getting to watch it land. She closed her notes, stood up, and walked to the small credenza along the wall where the coffee maker lived. How do you want it? She asked. Same as always. She poured 2 cups. She brought them back to the table and sat down. She did not say congratulations, or I told you so, or anything else that would have made the moment smaller than it was. She just slid his cup across to him and picked up her own. Jordan pulled the Forbes app up on his phone. The feature loaded slowly, the way things do when they matter. The photograph came first. Him in a charcoal blazer, standing in front of the open office floor with the Atlanta skyline filling the windows behind him. He looked like a man with somewhere to be. He read the headline, Jordan Webb, founder and CEO, WebRoot Solutions, on rebuilding logistics from the ground up. He read the whole thing, every paragraph. He read it the way you read something that contains your own name in a context you spent 3 years building toward, in parking lots and 2 a.m. diners and cleaning shifts that left his hands smelling like industrial solvent until noon the next day. He read it carefully, because it deserved that. When he was done, he set the phone face down on the table. He picked up his coffee. He said nothing. Petra said nothing either. That was one of the things he valued most about her. Across Atlanta, on the other side of a city that had no idea any of this was happening, Camille Fontaine was standing in a Barnes & Noble with her friend Tasha, half listening to a conversation about a dinner reservation, when she turned toward the register display rack and stopped. The magazine was right there, eye-level, glossy and bright. She saw the photograph before she registered the name. A man in a charcoal blazer, familiar jaw, familiar stillness in the posture, that particular way he stood when he was completely certain of something. She picked it up. She read the name. She stood there for a long moment. Tasha was still talking. Camille did not hear a word of it. She was looking at the photograph and reading the caption, and then reading the pull quote in the middle of the spread. We were solving a problem the industry didn't know how to price. We just had to get there before someone else did. And something moved through her that she could not name quickly enough to stop. She put the magazine back on the rack. Then she took it with her to the register and bought it. She called Jordan's number at 4:17 p.m. Jordan was in a meeting with 2 of his senior developers when his phone screen lit up face down on the table beside his notes. He turned it over once, just enough to see the name, Camille Fontaine. He looked at it for exactly as long as it took to understand what it meant. Then he turned the phone back over. Sorry, he said to the room. You were saying. The developer on his left continued talking. Jordan listened. He asked 2 questions. He made a note in the margin of his page. The meeting ran another 40 minutes, and he was present for all of it. She called again while he was walking back to his office. He let it ring. She called again before he reached his desk. He sat down, opened his email, and responded to 3 messages that had been waiting since morning. By the time he drove home that evening, she had called 11 times. By midnight, 23. By the following morning, when he pulled into the parking garage and rode the elevator up to the 14th floor with a coffee from the place on the corner, his phone showed a number that made him stop in the elevator doorway for just a moment. 97 missed calls, not one voicemail. Petra was already at the table when he walked in. She had her own coffee, and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and her laptop open to something she was marking up with focused efficiency. Jordan sat down across from her. He set his phone on the table between them without saying anything. Petra looked at the screen. She read the call log the way she read everything, straight through, no reaction. Processing. She set it back down. What do you want to do? She asked. Jordan looked at the call log for a moment. He turned the phone face down. I want to know why she's calling, he said. Not what she wants. He paused. Why she needs to. There's a difference. Petra held her coffee with both hands and waited. 97 calls, Jordan said. No voicemail. That's not someone who misses you. That's someone who needs something and can't figure out how to ask for it. He set his coffee down. Pull up everything on Bradford Alcott. Petra reached for her laptop. Jordan leaned back in his chair. His hands were loose in his lap. His face was calm and patient and completely still, the way he had learned to be, slowly and deliberately, in parking lots and diners and all the quiet hours when there was nothing left to do but think. The booth was in the back of a sandwich shop on Memorial Drive, the kind of place with laminate menus and a ceiling fan that worked too hard. Avery Tull was already there when Jordan arrived. He was a compact man, mid-50s, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent a long career watching people before they knew they were being watched. He had a glass of water and a manila folder, and no expression worth describing. He waited until Jordan sat down. Then he slid the folder across the table. Jordan opened it. He did not rush. He read each page the way he reviewed contract, straight through, no skipping, no assumptions. The folder contained 18 pages of source documentation, timestamps, photographs, financial records, and 3 pages of sourced witness testimony from people who had seen Bradford Alcott and Camille Fontaine together in places that told their own story clearly enough. The timeline started 14 months before Camille filed for divorce. Jordan turned a page. He kept reading. The investment properties were on page 9. 2 parcels, one in East Atlanta and one in Douglasville, co-listed under a shell LLC called Fontaine Alcott Property Group. The LLC had been formed 7 months before Camille filed. The properties had been funded in part through cash transfers from the joint savings account she had restructured, the same account that had been quietly drained of his direct deposit linkage 18 months before he ever saw a divorce summons. Neither property had appeared in divorce discovery. Combined current value, approximately $890,000. Jordan closed the folder. He set his hands flat on the table. He did not say anything for a moment. Outside, a truck rumbled past on Memorial Drive. The ceiling fan turned. A man 2 booths over laughed at something on his phone. "How clean is the paper trail on the LLC funding?" Jordan asked. "Clean enough," Avery said. "The transfers are traceable. I've got bank records showing the movement and dates that align with the LLC formation. It's not buried. She just counted on it not being found." Jordan nodded slowly. "How long to trace the full LLC filing history? Every amendment? Every asset attachment?" Avery considered it. "A week, maybe." "Take 4 days," Jordan said. Avery picked up the folder. 4 days, he said. He stood, dropped a 5 on the table for the water, and left without ceremony. Jordan watched him go. Then he picked up his coffee and stared at the window for a long time. The divorce was not a collapse. That was the thing he kept turning over. A collapse was something that happened to both people at once. Sudden, mutual, unplanned. What Camille had done was something else entirely. She had drawn a blueprint 14 months out. She had moved money, formed an LLC, positioned assets, and filed paperwork. She had done it carefully and incrementally, in steps small enough that no single one looked like anything more than routine financial management. She had built a trap with a 9-year foundation, and she had walked out of it clean. He had paid her for $200 settlement with a check that sat in his glove compartment while he slept in a parking lot. He sat with that for a moment. He let it be exactly as ugly as it was. Then he left the money for his coffee and walked back to his car. Avery delivered in 4 days, as agreed. The complete LLC filing history arrived in Jordan's email as a 60-page PDF with a 2-page summary at the front. Jordan read it twice. Then he forwarded the full package to Petra, the LLC records, the financial trail, the affair timeline, all of it, and she had it on Diana Osei's desk within the hour. Diana Osei was a financial fraud attorney who, according to Petra, was the last person opposing counsel wanted to see across a conference table. She was precise and relentless, and had built her practice on cases exactly like this one. Document-intensive, long in the litigating, and satisfying in ways that other attorneys found too expensive to care about. She reviewed the full package in 2 days. Her assessment arrived in 4 sentences. The LLC formation timeline, the transferred funds, the deliberate omission from divorce discovery, together they constituted a viable civil claim for fraudulent concealment of marital assets. She was prepared to file. Jordan said he needed a few more days. Diana said she'd be ready when he was. Jordan did not move immediately. He waited. He continued running WebRoute. He reviewed carrier contracts and sat in product meetings and signed off on a hiring decision that had been pending for 2 weeks. He let the information sit in him the way concrete sets, quietly, under pressure, until it was load-bearing. He was 3 days into waiting when Darnell called. "She reached out to Mama," Darnell said. No preamble. Just that. Jordan was quiet. "She asked Mama to help smooth things over with you. Said she just wants to talk." The ceiling fan in Jordan's office was not working too hard. It turned at exactly the right speed and made no sound at all. "Okay," Jordan said. "Thanks for telling me." He hung up and called his mother. Vivian picked up on the second ring. "Don't," Jordan said. A pause. Warm and knowing. "Baby," Vivian said. "I already know." Another pause. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Avery's final report arrived on a Wednesday morning. No meeting this time, just a secure email with a single attachment and a subject line that read, "Alcott, Final." Jordan opened it at his desk before anyone else arrived at the office. The summary was 8 pages. He read all 8. Bradford Alcott's development firm, Alcott Group LLC, incorporated in 2011, had been over-leveraged for at least 18 months. 2 projects were in formal default: a mixed-use development in Smyrna and a residential build in Sandy Springs that had stalled at framing. Combined outstanding debt on both, just over $4 million. Alcott had been circling refinancing options for the better part of a year, trying to find collateral that would satisfy a lender. The 2 Fontaine Alcott LLC properties were that collateral, or they were supposed to be. The problem, according to Avery's sourced notes from a real estate contact familiar with the appraisals, was that both properties had come in significantly below what Brad and Camille needed. The East Atlanta parcel had appreciated, but not enough. The Douglasville property had soft comps and a drainage issue that the appraiser flagged. Together, the numbers didn't work for the refinancing deal Brad needed. Not even close. Without the refinancing, Alcott Group's 2 defaulted projects would likely cascade. And Brad Alcott, facing that collapse, would need solutions that Camille could not provide. Jordan set the report down. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. 97 calls. He had been turning it over since the day the call log appeared on his phone. Why she needs to, not what she wants. And now, the picture was complete. Camille was not calling because she missed him. She was not calling because she felt guilty. She was calling because her attorney had almost certainly told her something she did not want to hear. That a window existed in the divorce decree for either party to contest asset division if fraud evidence emerged. A clean legal release, signed by Jordan, would close that window permanently. She was counting on him not knowing about the LLC. She had called 97 times because she needed one signature. Jordan thought about that for a moment. About a woman who had spent 9 years calculating every move, who had restructured accounts and formed shell companies and positioned assets 14 months in advance, now sitting somewhere across Atlanta, dialing his number over and over and over because her plan had developed a crack she hadn't engineered for. He did not feel triumphant. Not yet. He picked up his phone and called Diana Osei. "File it," he said. "Today," Diana said. It wasn't a question. "Today," Jordan confirmed. He heard the sound of a keyboard. "Done by 3, she said, and the call ended. He did not contact Camille directly. That was important. Everything that touched Camille from this point forward went through counsel, through Petra, through the formal architecture of process. Nothing personal. Nothing that could be read as anything other than procedural. He was not operating from emotion. He was operating from documentation. That afternoon, he asked Petra to reach out to Camille's attorney's office. The message was brief and deliberately neutral. Jordan Webb was open to a brief conversation. One location, a private conference room at Diana Osie's law firm in Buckhead. One date, 2 weeks out. She'll think she's walking into a negotiation, Petra said, reviewing the message before she sent it. I know, Jordan said. She's going to come in expecting to hand you something. I know that too. Petra sent the message. They had a response within the hour. Camille agreed immediately. That evening, Jordan drove to Vivian's house in College Park. She had cooked, baked chicken, rice, green beans with the smoked turkey neck she had been making since he was 9 years old. The kitchen smelled like every meal he had ever come home to. He sat at the same table where he had done homework in the 3rd grade. They ate. Vivian asked about the office, asked about Darnell's contracting work, refilled his sweet tea without being asked. She did not ask about Camille. She did not ask about the legal case or Bradford Alcott or any of it. After a while, Jordan set down his fork. In 2 weeks, he said. It ends. Vivian nodded. She picked up her own glass, held it with both hands, and looked at him the way she had always looked at him, like she was reading something the rest of the world couldn't see on his face. I know what you've built, she said. I know every step it cost you. She paused. And I know you slept in that car. Don't look at me like that. Darnell talks. Jordan looked at the table. You didn't call me once to complain, she said. Not once. You just put your head down and built something real. She reached across and refilled his tea again, even though it didn't need it. So, I'm going to tell you something you don't need to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway. He waited. Whatever happens in 2 weeks, you already have my blessing. You've had it since the night you slept in that parking lot and didn't quit. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. Yes, ma'am, he said. They finished dinner. He washed the dishes over her protest, dried them, and put them back exactly where they belonged. He hugged her at the door, held on a second longer than usual, and then walked to his car. He pulled up in front of his house 40 minutes later. He put the car in park, but didn't get out right away. It was a good house. Modest from the street. Brick front. Clean landscaping. A porch light he'd replaced himself because the old one flickered. Nothing like the 4-bedroom in southwest Atlanta that he had rebuilt with his own hands and lost in a courtroom that smelled like carpet cleaner. This house had never belonged to anyone but him. Every payment was his. Every repair was his. The deed had one name on it. He sat in the quiet for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled. Then he got out, walked up the front path, and went inside. Jordan arrived at 8:47 a.m. The elevator opened onto the 22nd floor, and he walked the length of the hallway without hurrying. The receptionist at Diana's firm pointed him toward the second conference room on the left, and when he pushed open the glass door, Diana and Petra were already there. Diana sat at the far end of the oval table with a closed leather portfolio in front of her. No coffee, no small talk. She looked up when Jordan entered, gave a short nod, and went back to reviewing something on her phone. Petra was near the windows, standing with her arms folded loosely, looking out over the Buckhead skyline. The morning light came in flat and bright. 30 floors below, Peachtree Road was already thick with traffic. She confirmed last night, Petra said, without turning around. Her attorney is a man named Gerald Fitch. Martindale Hubble rating. Decent civil work. Mostly real estate transactions. Not a litigator. Good, Jordan said. He set his leather portfolio on the table and took the chair directly facing the door. He had chosen that seat deliberately. He wanted to be the first thing Camille saw when she walked in. He poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table and sat with both hands resting flat on the surface. The room was quiet. The city hummed silently behind the glass. Somewhere down the hall, a printer ran through a job and stopped. They waited. At 9:04, the door opened. Camille walked in first. She was dressed in a charcoal wrap dress, heels, her hair pulled back, smooth and clean. She looked the way she always looked when she needed to make an impression. put together in a way that took effort, but was designed to appear effortless. Her posture was steady. Her expression was composed. She carried herself like a woman who had walked into difficult rooms before and come out fine. Her attorney followed. Gerald Fitch, late 50s, a navy suit. The kind of silver-haired presentation that was meant to signal authority before he opened his mouth. Camille's eyes moved across the room in one practiced sweep. They landed on Jordan. Something passed across her face. Not quite surprise, not quite relief. Some complicated thing that she controlled almost immediately. Then her eyes moved to Petra. Then to Diana. She didn't know Diana's name. Jordan could see that in the half-second pause, the slight recalibration behind her eyes. Diana was sitting at the table in a charcoal blazer with a portfolio, and the particular stillness of someone who had been in this kind of room 100 times. That stillness, Jordan knew, was its own signal. Camille's gaze moved away from Diana's face and back to neutral, but the recalibration had already happened. She sat down across from Jordan. Fitch took the chair beside her, clicked open a briefcase, and began arranging papers. Jordan. Camille's voice was warm, careful. The voice she used when she wanted to appear reasonable before she needed something. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Jordan looked at her. He said. Fitch cleared his throat and took the opening. He spoke for 3 minutes, smoothly, professionally, outlining a proposition his client was prepared to offer. A revisitation of certain settlement arrangements from the original divorce decree. A goodwill gesture. Flexibility on both sides. All Jordan needed to do was sign a comprehensive release of any future claims related to the marriage or marital property. Clean. Simple. Everyone moves forward. When Fitch finished, the room was quiet. Jordan did not respond right away. He let the silence sit. He took a slow breath, looked down at the table once, and then reached for the leather portfolio in front of him. He opened it. He removed a single folder and placed it on the table. Then he slid it across the smooth surface toward the center, directly in front of Camille and Fitch. He did not say anything yet. Fitch picked up the folder and opened it. The first page was the LLC registration for Fontaine Alcott Properties, filed 7 months before the divorce papers arrived at Jordan's door. Behind it, the financial records showing the funding trail from the restructured joint savings account. Behind that, the timeline of the romantic relationship between Camille and Bradford Alcott, sourced and dated, beginning 14 months before the filing. Behind that, a single-page written statement signed by Reginald Fontaine, describing in plain language 2 separate industry events at which Camille had described her husband to professional contacts as brilliant but not leadership material, someone better suited to support roles. And on the very last page, the cover sheet of a civil fraud complaint for fraudulent concealment of marital assets, filed in Fulton County 4 days prior. Diana O'Sea's name was printed at the bottom as counsel of record. Jordan waited until Fitch had turned enough pages to understand what he was holding. Then he spoke. His voice was even. He did not rush. He did not raise it. He spoke for 6 minutes, without interruption, laying out, in the order it happened, exactly what had been done, and when, and what it had cost him. The account restructuring. The LLC. The properties that never appeared in discovery. The 14 months of planning before the papers ever arrived. The promotion that was quietly killed. The business ideas turned to ash by a patient, reasonable voice in the dark. The night he slept in a parking lot behind a Kroger with a $4,200 check in his glove compartment and 4 pages of a business framework on a laptop he'd paid for himself. He did not perform any of it. He simply reported it, the way a man reports something that already happened, to someone who hasn't been told yet. "I'm not angry at you anymore," he said. "I was, but what I am now is finished." He looked at her directly. "The law is going to handle the rest." He folded his hands and said nothing further. Fitch was still reading. His eyes moved from page to page with the careful, increasingly careful attention of a man doing arithmetic that wasn't adding up the way he'd been told it would. Camille sat very still, and something left her face. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way a light behind a curtain goes out. One moment it was there. That composed, practiced steadiness she had carried into the room. And then, page by page, as Fitch turned through the folder, it simply wasn't anymore. The civil fraud complaint moved through the courts the way Diana Osei moved through everything, quietly, precisely, and without mercy. Jordan did not have to do much after the conference room. That was the thing about building something correctly. Once it was standing, it stood on its own. The court issued an asset freeze on the 2 LLC investment properties within 3 weeks of the complaint being filed. $890,000 in real estate, locked, untouchable. Bradford Alcott had been counting on those properties as refinancing collateral for 2 over-leveraged development projects that were already bleeding. Without them, he had nothing to present to his lenders, nothing to restructure around, nothing to hold the weight of what he'd built on promises and projections, and a woman who had assured him the numbers were clean. They were not clean. The first development went into formal default 31 days after the freeze. The second followed 2 weeks after that. Camille's firm placed her on administrative leave. The same week, the complaint became a matter of public record. A paralegal handling real estate transactions could not remain active while under civil litigation for real estate fraud. Not at a firm with a reputation to protect. Not in Georgia. Not anywhere. The administrative leave lasted 3 weeks. Then it became a termination. Jordan learned this from Avery, who had kept a loose thread of contact open and passed information along without editorializing. Just facts, clean and flat. Brad ended the relationship somewhere in the middle of all of it. Jordan never learned the exact date and did not try to find out. It did not matter. 2 people who had built something on calculation had simply presented each other with the final bill. Camille reached out through her attorney requesting a brief off-the-record meeting. No lawyers present. A coffee shop in their old neighborhood on the west side. A place they had gone together sometimes on Saturday mornings a long time ago. Jordan agreed. He brought Petra. The coffee shop was small and warm, the kind of place with exposed brick and handwritten specials on a chalkboard. Jordan and Petra were already seated when Camille arrived. She looked different than she had in the conference room, less assembled. Like something she had been holding together for a long time had gotten heavier since the last time he'd seen her. She sat down. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. And then she talked. She said she had made mistakes. She said she had been scared. Scared of how capable Jordan was. Scared of what that meant for her. Scared of being left behind by a man who might one day outgrow her. She said that in some way, the pressure she put on him had come from knowing, somewhere deep down, that he was capable of exactly this. She gestured vaguely at what this meant. The Forbes cover, the company, the conference room, all of it. She said that maybe, in her own way, she had pushed him toward it. She let that sit in the air between them. Jordan listened to every word. He did not interrupt. He did not shift in his chair. He let her finish the whole thing, right to the end, and then he let a moment of quiet pass before he said anything at all. "You didn't call me 97 times because you missed me," he said. His voice was the same as it had been in the conference room, level, unhurried, impossible to rattle. "You called because you needed something. You have always only ever needed something from me." He looked at her steadily. "The difference now is that I have nothing left that belongs to you." Camille held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at her cup. "The court will handle the rest," Jordan said. He stood. Petra stood beside him. He did not look back on his way out the door. The civil case settled 8 months later. $340,000, structured, paid out over time in a legal agreement that would follow Camille Fontaine's credit history for years. Diana Osei called Jordan when the final papers were signed. She said, "Done." He said, "Thank you." That was the whole conversation. Brad Alcott's firm filed for bankruptcy 14 months after the asset freeze. Avery sent a one-line message. Jordan read it, set his phone down, and went back to the term sheet he was reviewing. Darnell's contracting firm won its first commercial bid, a subcontracting role on a WebRoot office build-out that Jordan had quietly made sure came Darnell's way. Darnell called him when he found out. He didn't say much. Neither did Jordan. They didn't need to. 18 months after the conference room, WebRoot Solutions closed a Series A funding round of $14 million. The day the announcement ran, Jordan sat in his office on the third floor of a building in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward. 34 employees beyond the glass wall behind him, a waiting list of carrier clients, a company that had started as 2 words on a blank document in a parking lot at 2 a.m. Petra sat across from his desk with the term sheet, reviewing the final language one last time. She looked up. "How do you feel?" she asked. Jordan considered the question the way he considered most things, honestly, without rushing it. "Like I've been building this house for 3 years," he said. "And I just moved in." Petra smiled. "It's a good house." "Yes," Jordan said. He turned toward the window. The Atlanta skyline stretched out below him, bright and wide in the morning light. "It is." He stood there quietly. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the term sheet and the 14 million and the 34 employees and the carrier contracts, he thought of a parking lot on Cascade Road. Orange light through a car window, a laptop open on his chest in the dark, 2 words at the top of a blank page. He had never needed anyone to see him clearly. He just needed enough time to see himself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.